Welcome back to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam, and we're continuing on with chapter 2. We're going to get into something quite dense now, so there'll be plenty of explanation and it'll be slow and purposeful, so don't worry about being left behind or anything like that. Should be sweet. So, don onton tamen kath hypokaimenu. Right, this word here. This is key. This is going to keep popping up all the time. We'll come back to it in just a moment. Tononton tamen kath hypokaimenu tinos legatai. En hypokaimenoi de udani estin. Hoion anthropos kath hypokaimenu men legatai tu tinos anthropu. En hypokaimenoi de udani esti. Alright. So, to kick it off, we've got this one. It says, of beings, which is a really general way of talking. He's talking about all created things in those two words. Tononton. Of the created things, of the beings, right? Of things that exist. There are those, right, which are said according to some subject. If you don't know, if you haven't learned ancient or classical or Attic Greek yet, you can see how I jump around the sentence. And Aristotle, he's really good at making sentences a puzzle. So if my translations come through as a bit jolted in English, it's because I'm trying to keep as literal as possible as I can to his translation. Sometimes I have to forego that and I have to just make up the closest possible translation or just capture his meaning. But for the most part, I try to stay literal, and that's why my translations can sound jolted, because the way he structures his sentences is just amazing. I love reading his Greek. It's a little bit of a Rubik's Cube every time you read a sentence, but it also sounds really good all the time. But anyway, yeah, sorry, distracted by that. Tononton tamen kath hypokaimenu tinos legatai. En hypokaimenoi, there's substance again. Hypokaimenoi. De udani esti. So he's saying there are some things, right, which we talk about in relation to or according to a substance, but it's not in the substance. Now here is his example. Hoion anthropos kath hypokaimenu men legatai tu tinos anthropo. Just as man is said according to some man, en hypokaimenoi, in the subject, de udani esti. On the other hand, it's not in a subject. Now, right now, the normal reaction is to think, okay, it's said according to, but it's not in the man. How does that work? Well, you just need to think about it as there are some things he's trying to distinguish, and he's doing a perfect job of it, distinguishing between things that are said to come and go and things that are really stable and permanent. So what's stable and permanent about a human being? The fact that they're a man, okay? And I don't mean that as in the male sense, the XY chromosome sense. I mean like a member of mankind, okay? An anthropos, right? So a woman can be a man in that sense. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that she can be a man XY chromosome. I'm just saying that she's a member of mankind, and I'm using man in that older sense of the word, from which was super popular in the 1800s, even the early 1900s, okay? So just to clarify that in case someone was confused or if I was only talking about males, no, I'm talking about all members of mankind. So what is it that we have that is stable as a man? Well, let's look at an artwork and see if we can figure it out. Okay, here's someone, vanitas unanitatum et omnia vanitas. vanity of vanities, and everything is vanity. It sounds like what that is supposed to say. Anyway, we have two people here. Okay, we have what looks like a teacher and a student. She's having a lesson in something, maybe scripture. But what do they have in common? Well, we could call them animals, couldn't we? Or mammals. Why is that? Why is it we can call them a mammal or an animal? Well, it's because in what it means to be a human being, we have to say that they're an animal, okay, and that they're a mammal, and that they're a human. So we look at this person and we say that this person is John and this person is Jane. All right, describe Jane to me. If you wanted to say the most stable and permanent things about Jane or John, you would say human, mammal, animal. Right? Perfect. Wonderful. Those things don't change, and they're necessary. Okay? They're said according to Jane and John all the time, without fail. No matter how old or how young, how fat or how skinny, how smart or how ignorant that they may be, whatever the case may be, they are going to be a human, a mammal, and an animal, okay? Or just human and animal if you want to make it simpler, okay? No matter what. Let's have a look at another one. We've been talking about human beings a lot. Let's have a look at an animal for once. Let's imagine it sort of looks like an owl, but it could be a different bird just based on how I'm seeing it. So imagine it's an owl, right? You say it's a bird and it's an animal. Of course, you cannot be an owl without being a bird and an animal. And do you see how this is related to the lessons that we were talking about before with homonyms, synonyms, paronyms? Synonyms, you're talking about a thing according to something further away, something more general than what it is. For Jane and John, okay, the students, all right, and the teacher, I've lost the image now, but that's all right. For them to be a student in the first place, they had to be a human and then an animal, right? A synonym is when you speak about those stable and necessary parts of the substance. What is the substance? Well, the substance right now that we're talking about is who you are, what they are, that unique thing. Okay, so if I look at this one, right, primary substance here that we're talking about is Jesus Christ of Nazareth, right? Let's look at another one that's recognizable. Let's imagine this is a saint, okay? You'd say saint plus their name. That's the substance. We have Homer here, okay? So there is Homer. That is the substance that we're talking about. And what are those things that are said according to those substances? Well, for Homer, we're going to say it's a man. For that owl that we looked at, it's bird, okay? An animal. It's said according to that substance, but it's not in the substance. Now, let's clarify that point. You'd be thinking to yourself, how is being for King David, how is being a human not in him, right? Look, he clarifies this here. En hypokaimenoi de lego ho en tini me hos meros hyparkon adunaton choris ainai tu en hoiestin, right? He says, in the subject, right? I now say in the subject as not being like a part. Hoen is like that in something. Me hos meros, not like a part in the subject. Adunaton choris ainai tuen hoiestin. Impossible for it to be outside of that which it is in. All right? Impossible for it to be outside of that which it is in. But it's not in it like a part. Okay? Look at the parts of this harp, right? So like it's got the various strings and the main frame and stuff like that, and there are pieces inside it, and you could take it apart and look at the pieces inside it, right? It's not the same for what we're talking about here. These really stable things that we're talking about for a human being, right? A proper human being, not a homonym of a human being, right? We're not equivocating here. We're saying for a human being, being whoever it is, if it's Homo, or if it's you yourself who are listening, being a human being, being a human, being an animal, are within us. It's a part of our essence, but not like a part. Okay, not like a part of a machine, not like a part of a watch, not like a part of a book or a fan or something like that. It's not like you go onto the operating table and the surgeon has to carefully cut around the pure humanness or the pure animalness, right? In modern biology and things like that, we say it's in our DNA, our RNA, it's in our genetics. I won't get into that just yet. There is actually a really good time to get into that at length, and that's further down the track. I'm going to save it for then. But yes, that's a really good way of thinking about it. These really stable things are like the genetic necessities. So if you said, "Oh, I'm inviting someone over today for the party," is that okay? You wouldn't expect that the person that they're inviting is a crab, okay? Why? Well, first of all, a crab can't understand, but all that aside, every human being shares in common these stable things, right? Someone can't be someone without being an animal and being a human, right? A crab is a crustacean and an animal, okay? And it can't be anything but that, right? At no point in its life is it anything but that, right? Now, some things have a life cycle, and that can confuse us, but at the end, they're still what that thing is. So if it's a butterfly, it always was and always was going to be a butterfly, unless fate intervenes. Same for a frog, okay? It's a tadpole at one stage, cool, but it's always a frog, okay? So human being, this owl, so long as we're not speaking of homonyms, have these things in their essence. In their essence, okay? Not as a part, but we're saying that it's in it and it cannot exist without it. We never ever see pure birdness or pure humanness out there in the cosmos, okay? The Artemis 2 mission that we just had doesn't fly around the moon and accidentally spots using sophisticated instruments that there is pure humanness on the moon, okay? It exists in us in the sense that we cannot be what we are without it. This is the first of the lessons. These things, right now, if you want to give them a name, are secondary substances. What we're talking about here is secondary substances. Hypokaimenu. Hypo is like below, beneath, all right? Kaimenu is actually coming from the word of lying, like as in position. So something that lies beneath is what we say is a substance, and that's sort of reflected in the Latin, substan. It's like standing under, all right? The substance is what's underneath all the other things. And some of the other things that we were talking about are qualities like being grammatical or being musical. Or here's another example I didn't talk about. Andreas, apotes Andreas ho Andreios, right? From courage, the courageous. From brave, the brave. From bravery, the brave. These are qualities that rest upon what the substance is. And we can say that for every substance that we see, whether it's yourself, your best friend, your mother or father, or brother or sister, whoever it might be, they all have and share in common these secondary substances, which is human and animal. All right, and there are other things too we could talk about, but for now, those two basic ones are the essential ones to give an example of, and they're called secondary substances. They are not a part of us. Okay, they cannot be found through operation or different scans. People may say it's in our genetics. People may say it's a part of our soul. We will get into that at the proper time. And we will move on to learn more about these things. But you can see now why chapter 1 set us up so perfectly. Okay, so chapter 1 is the philosopher's attempt of, before he starts his exploration of different things, he wants us to be so aware of the fact that our words might lead us astray. So if you had a homonym and you were trying to say that the man is an animal, all right, these men are animals. This is a really obvious explanation, but if one of the men is a statue of David, okay, yeah, you could call that a man, but that's not an animal. It's an artwork, right? It's a marble artwork. And when you start combining, this is from a lesson before, when you start combining things that are said with the subject, right? So the man is standing. Well, if you said that about the David statue, the man is standing, that's an equivocation, because that's actually not a man. That's a statue, right? So standing wasn't combined with the proper subject. So you can see how all these things flow on from each other, and that is the final point of this particular lesson that I'm making today, is that everything flows on. You don't just learn one thing and then you abandon it and you have to try and remember it. No, it keeps coming up. Everything that we learn about keeps building on the thing you just learned about, which is fantastic. If you feel like you don't have a great memory, well, you're in luck, because you're constantly remembering all the things that you learned before to build on to something more complex. Now, this can make sometimes learning a new thing quite a puzzle, and that's okay. That's actually quite fun. It means that everything we learn isn't boring and stale and predictable. But remember that final point, that nothing that we learn is ever just left behind, right? It's never just abandoned. We will keep coming back to it and keep revisiting it and applying it to new and more complex things all the time. So for those who are a little bit nervous about their memory, or that they didn't learn well enough as they would have liked, I know there may be some perfectionists listening, and they may be thinking, I really want to master this before I move on. Don't worry. You'll master it as you go along. We'll keep talking about synonyms and paronyms and homonyms throughout the entire course. And, if you have a look at the page count on this, something like 812 pages in this education. So you have plenty of time. Don't you worry. And if you'd like further material to study with, especially if you want your own book to hold and your own translations to revisit, then I'll have a link in the description for those people. But thank you for listening today. We covered a lot. We pretty much tied together everything that we're talking about and hinted at more. So hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Hope it was useful. Thank you for your time. My name is Liam, and I'll see you next time.